be desperate.
Hey,
So we'll see how that goes. That'll be kind of fun. Hey, Michael.
Good to see you guys. Good. How was Phoenix?
We weren't there.
Oh, that's right. We're doing a different model.
We're Fort Wayne guys now.
Yeah.
Saving money.
I
I heard it was pretty hot.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Oh, you weren't there, Michael?
Nope.
Oh.
No. Mm-mm. Yeah, I went to that first go, and because my job transition happened after that first time, I haven't been able to do so. So I'm actually because of that, I'm going to go be on team for a new learning community in November that will be launching in Compton. So Pat Dirksey is leading that one out, and so I'll go and be on team with Pat. But I've got 2, maybe 3 teams from my region that are going to be participating in that. So that was kind of the final straw that helped me to decide I will invest some time in there. So trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to juggle all these different kind of responsibilities and making sure that I'm keeping everybody happy. Hey, Brian, good to see you.
Yeah, you have to work on that rhythm. Right?
I know. I am really, really appreciating all of the flexibility that I get from my full-time job. But I'm just trying to make sure that he's staying satisfied with the results that I'm producing and the freedom that he gives. And so, for me, I was gone last week because I had include Anthony in there because I thought that some team was going. I think I had forgotten that there was a full transition. And so I was away. We went up north and went crabbing. I went to Coos Bay, Oregon, and did some crabbing. Oh my goodness, caught 107 crab, ate Dungeness like crazy every night and brought back a ton. And it was an amazing experience for me. So actually have a new crabbing trip planned for December. And so looking forward to that as well. So caught the bug, that's for certain.
Caught the bug.
The crab.
Yep, caught the crab, yeah. So I got crabs when I went to Oregon,
So how many crabs can Michael eat at one sitting?
I don't know that actual answer because literally, so the first day we caught 69 crab, cooked them all up, which, there's this huge, colander stock pot that my friend has that he just kept boiling them. And we did them in 4 batches. We, laid out the table with a tablecloth and newspapers and just dumped this full quarter batch on the table, and everybody just digging in with bread and butter and all that kind of stuff. And then the second batch is done probably about half of an hour later, and there's still a little bit left, and he just dumps that batch on top, and we eat through more of it. And the 2 batches we just saved and put away in ice chests. So I probably ate. Oh gosh, I really don't know. I probably ate 5 or 6 crab at least, if not more. And that's both leg clusters off of each crab. Oh, it's beautiful.
So you are the man. You are the man.
And there were some people out eating me too. My buddy Brandon was there with us. We went with another family, 2 other families, and Brandon, his pile of remains was even taller than mine was. So I couldn't taste. But it was beautiful to eat crab until you can't eat anymore. But the other really cool spot was my son was there because he's in Oregon, and his girlfriend and her daughter were there as well, and he proposed to her. So that was really excellent. Yeah, so she said yes, and this has kind of been brewing for a while, but it formally happened, and so I will be. I will be a papa immediately as soon as that wedding takes place. So I became an instant father when I married Kimberly because she had Zach, and I will become an instant grandfather as soon as Zach gets married. So I'm joining the club. Are all of you grandfathers?
Not me.
Not you. Okay. You're the holdout right there. So yeah, I'm kind of excited.
He's a young kid.
So catch me up. What's been happening in the last couple of weeks for you guys? Clarence, start us off.
Yeah, so for me, this yeah, last week I had a good couple of conversations with my youngest daughter about family on mission. So I gave her the book, and she's been reading that. And so she was visiting last Friday and Thursday and Friday with the grandkids. So that was great to have those conversations. Met with my other disciples, so that was going well. Met with Andrew, trying to begin changing that discipling relationship. We talked about that, so that's started and going okay. This week, spending most of my time doing credentialing stuff. We got credentialing interviews this week. We do a pre-screen, so which is before a person can get hired in one of our churches. If they're outside of the denomination, they have to have a pre-screen. So I'm working through that, prepping for an ethics review. Sometimes if there's a clergy that there's a moral issue that requires investigation, then so I got research I'm doing for that. So this week's been kind of full of that kind of stuff, actually. Getting ready as well to head north and do a disciple making training workshop at Toon Island. About 16 people registered. One of our local churches, and they invited a couple other churches to join in.
Nice.
So doing that. Yeah, so that's kind of what's been keeping me busy.
That's awesome. Thanks for the check-in. Hey, Lynn, good to see you, buddy. Brian, how about go next? You do us a little catch-up.
Yeah, so last Thursday returned from Phoenix with a real nasty cold. And actually Lynn still has it. I think I'm pretty well over it, but I hope. And so literally I tried to stay off my feet and rest. I made a concerted effort to do that, except that we had, so Thursday I got home really sick, and Friday evening our kids and family were meeting together to celebrate my wife's birthday, which I was supposed to cook the meal, get the cake, get a gift, all those kind of things. So I barely made it through cooking the meal. I forgot the cake and the gift. And so anyway, her actual birthday is tomorrow. So we're heading out to BC and, we'll figure out there. But boy, this cold was nasty. And so I was down, just got back an hour or so ago from our Alberta Pastor Development Days. And so we had a total of 40-ish pastors and spouses together at one of our camps just west of here, and had a good day, some training on authoritative prayer, as well as EMCC information and good prayer and fellowship, coaching opportunities, times. And I'm trying to get rid of the last space of this cold, but I think I'm doing okay.
Nice. That's good. That's awesome. Authoritative prayer. I love that. I'd love to hear a little bit more of it. Is that where's that come from?
So our president, Kervin Rugust, these are some of his passions that he's trying to get into a recognition of authority and prayer. And so this is one of his passions. And he had 3 books from Dutch Sheets available. So, and they were, actually, I've read Dutch Sheets. Some people maybe have cautions over Dutch, but I felt some of his stuff on prayer is really good.
Love it.
So yeah, Kervin was doing some teaching on that.
That's awesome. John, catch us up, buddy. What's the last couple of weeks been like for you?
Compared to Clarence, I feel like I should do some work. Compared to Brian, I feel strong and healthy. Off to a good pace for September. September in our family is birthday month too. And so there's been lots of good family interactions. I feel like my daily rhythm, particularly in the morning, is really anchored well. And I draw tremendous joy and life from a routine that I seem to have been able to carry on now for a couple of weeks. And so it's been also encouraging. This week I launched my first huddle orientation meeting on Tuesday, and then I have another huddle tomorrow beginning, and there was 3 on Tuesday and 6 tomorrow. So anyways, the Lord has opened the floodgates in some respects, and the huddle experience Tuesday was wonderful, as all you guys have experienced, and tomorrow should be interesting, managing 6 people.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, you were debating on what to do with the possibility of 4, and now you've got 9 total in huddle. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah, I just think I'm going to not do anything else. I think I'll just stay doing this.
Oh, that's really good. Really good. Okay, Lynn, catch us up.
Well, I'm not doing as good as Brian. My cold is still hanging on, and but I can sing bass, and so I did that when we were out there. It was fun. Yeah, our Way of Jesus Huddle we suspended it for the month of September, so we haven't met for a week, and so we're just not. It's such a packed in time for the guys, so we just push pause, and we'll pick it up again in October, and hopefully we'll shift to a different day. But again, positive experiences, and I was able to press into one of my pastor disciples out at the retreat, and just ask him, what are you learning? What are you finding that's working well? What's helpful? And so we had a good conversation, having been through this for 5 months, and just to see how he's seeing that. So that's good. Personally, every time I come into the fall, I feel like I'm on a freeway in rush hour and just packed in. And so I was, praying, and I was saying, Lord, what's a different, how do I approach this fall? And it was a couple months ago when we were, about 3 months ago, when I was teaching, all the guys were teaching the learning circle in the Way of Jesus Huddle. And one guy goes, the learning circle is kind of like a traffic circle. When you come into it, you have to deliberately slow down, and you're not going to come out the same way you came in. You're going to come out different, but you have to approach it by just slowing down and paying attention to what's coming. And I thought that was a pretty cool insight, using a circle for a circle. And that came to mind again, that coming into this fall, I just need to actually slow down and pay attention to what's coming my way. And then the whole thought of where Jesus was doing teaching, and he said, just only worry about the things for this day. Tomorrow will take care of itself. And so just to take a one day at a time approach to the fall. Yes, it's on the calendar. Yes, there's plans. Yes, I'm going to BC over the weekend and for the next week. And yes, there's all that stuff on there. But to take each day as that's the day I'm focusing on. And so that helped me kind of in my brain exit off this, rush hour freeway tension and then angst, and move into more of a settledness in my soul. So that's what's been tracking with for the last a couple of days, and that's been good.
That's awesome.
And of course, Phoenix was amazing, and there were some really cool things about the gospel, your gospel, my gospel, and that was there was good learning there, and really helpful, and to develop a bit of a new language for my gospel.
Yeah.
So that's me.
That's great. John and Claren, who are Fort Wayners now, when's the next immersion for you guys?
November.
November. Okay. Yep. Awesome. And I think I remember when you guys are making this decision now, there's more coming back to me. You guys have plans to make sure that you're debriefing and pulling kind of the content from one another and all that? Good.
Yeah, we do have a planned meeting after their November immersion.
Yeah.
Although Kervin just said to both Lynn and I, he wants to meet with us to talk about our what we've learned in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And but the November integration is going to include Greg Renault, who's going to be the 3DM hub guy, and it could possibly include some of our other guys besides RMs trying to navigate 2020. Yeah.
Now, I don't remember if I asked this before. Do we know that the Fort Wayne learning community is operating on the new learning community schedule? Okay. That'll be interesting to find out. And I don't know that it's going to be hugely problematic because your process of getting information from one another and learning from each other's experiences will still be rich and helpful. But I don't know that I thought of that because I think Bob's is the first full huddle under the 5 immersion new strategy. I'm imagining because Chris Norman is on the central team that has been a formal rollout, but I don't know for certain. So that'd be interesting to find out.
Fort Wayne is only scheduled for 4.
There you go. Then that's the answer. And this will be the 3rd immersion for Fort Wayne?
Yeah.
Yeah. So see the old structure was to go through building a discipling culture in module immersion 1, multiplying missional disciples in immersion 2, launching missional communities in number 3, and then leading kingdom movements number 4. Whereas, and I can't articulate the new one, but it's like be disciples, make disciples, multiply disciples.
Train disciples was the
Train disciples, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, so you're going to get the same content. It's the scope and sequence that has been modified. And here, so that you guys have insight into like the methodology back behind it. Some of the what we got from people who went through the 4 immersion process was by the time they got to launch missional communities, most of them weren't ready to do it yet because they still needed backfill work on those first 2 modules of, building a discipling culture and then multiplying missional leaders. So they needed more time, and they were tempted to rush past the personal application in order to see fruit come at the church level. And so it's a slower pace that deals with more personalized kairos so that it prepares you to be able to lead things out. But it's still the same content. It's just that's kind of the key thing that's different in there. So you share that with one another and learn from all of that. So I've never been through the new framework all the way through. And so I only have the old framework to be able to go from. So just to give you a little bit of extra feedback that way. Okay, here's where we're going to go today. We have in front of us, let's see, Claren, are you prepared to teach the semicircle for us in review? Great. Claren's going to do a review of the semicircle. And we're going to look at Matthew chapter 3, 31 to 35, and then we'll work the circle with the questions that I'll get loaded up into the chat bar in just a little bit. So, Claren, if you want to take it from here, go for it.
Okay, I'll try to share the screen. Come on, share. You see that okay? Good. All right. If you want to take your Bible, turn to John 15. We'll get there in a few moments, and pretend that pretend along with me that I'm talking to a couple guys that I'm discipling. So anyways, I'll start now. Hey guys, so thanks for meeting today and investing, again, significant amount of time with each other to build a relationship with each other and with Jesus. So I really appreciate you doing that. And we're at this stage now where we're really moving from the investment of time of me discipling you, and now you beginning to reach out and disciple your guys. And so, there is this question of where does this time fit in? How do we make this all work? How do we develop this rhythm and pattern of just an ordinary lifestyle that fits this all in? And there's definitely sometimes some tensions as we work through that. But again, this is where we get to look at the life of Jesus to see how did he live this out. He's our, not more just our Savior and Lord, but he's also our example. And so Jesus lived out this rhythm of life that was very intentional and healthy. We see him really working out of working and resting, abiding, in other words, and fruitfulness. We see early in the morning he would get up and meet with his Father, and there would be that abiding with him, and then out of that he'd engage in ministry, and then he would had a weekly rhythm of gathering at the Sabbath and meeting together with other synagogue worshipers, and then taking a day of rest, and all those kinds of rhythms Jesus practiced and lived out a healthy, fruitful life. And so we want to not just look at how he lived, but in John chapter 15 at verses 1-5, if someone would volunteer to read that, we'll look at what Jesus taught regarding developing healthy rhythm and balance of life. Maybe not balance, but healthy rhythm. Got a volunteer? John 15, 1-5 there. I can see you all now.
I'm the vine, true vine. My Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing.
Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate you reading that. So Jesus is using this illustration out of a common, ordinary thing that everyone would have known about, is how do you grow grapes. And so he was making it very, very clear the reality of fruitfulness really only comes out of the reality that the branch is attached to the main vine. In other words, it's critically important to have covenant relationship with God. And just as that main trunk of the vine provides everything the branch needs, we receive all that we need to be fruitful in ministry as we abide in our relationship with Christ. So the big point for me as I was reflecting on this is that our lasting fruitfulness for the kingdom only comes from abiding in Christ. So if we were going to diagram this out, we could kind of use a semicircle. We have Jesus teaching here about the importance of abide, and then the aspect of bearing forth fruit. And the reality is, when we live this out, there is some kind of tension that we feel as we wrestle this through. And as we talked about, he lives out this life of closest with the Father, gets up in the morning, spend times with him, launches out in ministry for the day, serves a little while with his disciples, and then he withdraws again into a quiet place. The Sabbath, withdrawal, then back into ministry. At times he seems to have a seasonal aspect as well. They're very, very busy out here in ministry. Lots of great things happening, and all of a sudden then he's pulling his disciples back. Okay, guys, let's go and spend some time quietly away with the Father, away from the crowds. Then they engage in ministry, sometimes for several days, tensive, demanding, and then times he would pull away for an extended period of time, way away. Nobody knew their names, so that all that. So that was the kind of the rhythm that he modeled there, lived out. And the reality is, if we are spending too much time bearing fruit, what our text talks about there is that we need to be open to God pruning some things out of our life so that we have time to really abide with him. So I don't live in California, but I do grow grapes. I got 3 vines in the backyard. I'm not much of a vine dresser, and lots of times I don't really pay attention too much to them. But this year I was did a little better at pruning them, and so instead of having my vines growing way up the arbors, I was going at them a couple different times, cutting them back, and I can definitely see the difference in the grapes this year. They're bigger, and then sometimes little wee grapes that I was growing, and that's because the nutrients were allowed to be, because I was pruning back the leafy stuff, the nutrients and the moisture were able to go into the grapes instead of into just the adding more vines. And so that allows, when we're doing that, the Lord's pruning in our lives, gives us more time to abide with him. And as we do so, that allows us to be, we see more growth actually taking place. But the danger when we think about growth is it's not growth in just the leafy vines. What we're really looking for here is grapes, because that's where the seeds are. That's where the multiplication is. And so it's good to abide with God. It's good to invite him into our life and say, okay, Lord, what are the things that need to be pruned in my life so that I can really be covenantally connected to you, hearing your voice, following your lead, in step with your spirit, therefore that I'm giving myself to the things that are under your leadership and your lordship. Anyway, so as we're reflecting on that today, what's God speaking to you out of John chapter 15 and these concepts? The end.
Nice. If you'll leave that up there for us. Awesome. Well done. Loved the lead-in. I actually felt like I was in your huddle in that sense. Like you had it all contextualized too, like kind of almost the stage that we are at. So it definitely felt like you were talking to a group of people that you had been with for quite a while. And so I loved that you were even including that this is something to look at as they're looking at trying to build things out in their life. And so great job contextualizing. I was following along with you as you were painting that stage for us. Good job, laying out abiding and bearing fruit. And again, I don't always get to experience somebody else leading the huddle with the swinging pendulum, but I find that to be effective. I think it's helpful to see it. The static component, when you draw it out, you see the movement, but you almost have to keep repeating that again and again. So I think that that's really helpful. Great job there. Good modeling and imitation. Good use of including the pruning and the growth in there and contextualizing that in the flow of how things work out that way. So I think it was really good and strong. I don't know for certain how I feel about like landing the plane with grapes and seeds. I like the idea because you're hitting on fruitfulness and you're itemizing what the fruit is, and then you're talking about, and I like the language of seeds of multiplication. I just felt like, especially since you wrote it there, it drew attention to it, and I didn't know for certain if there was actually something that you use that specific thing for. So I don't know. I think it was great because it gave me a picture of true fruitfulness, and then the seeds of multiplication. I liked that language, but I was wondering if it was helpful to actually like build off of by actually putting it here. So that was some of my thoughts and feedback in there. I think that, yeah, that's the overall gist. Somebody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say, Claren, I really like the backstory and how you brought this up and brought us in. Really connected that. I understand what Michael's saying with the grapes and the seeds, but again, because I've seen this so many times, it was a little different twist, and so it brought me in, and it did. Even though it was kind of a last blurb about the multiplication, I think there is a point there, but there was something in you're using your personal experience with the grapes and bringing out the seeds that brought me in.
Yep.
To a multiplication journey, and that's the fruit that we're moving forward with. So I don't know how I'd do that different, but it brought me in. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else want to jump in?
I was actually caught by the grapes and the seeds. Always we see bear fruit, but with the illustration that Jesus used, what we're looking for is, and I was expecting Claren to say fruit, but because of his context, he said what we're looking for is grapes that have the seed for multiplication. It's like, boom, there it is. So that really caught me too. And so it wasn't just bare fruit, but it was fruit that had seeds in it for multiplication. I thought that was good. I'm going to steal it.
Nice.
Maybe.
Here in reflection and in kind of conversation, this is what I'm realizing, and this may be that it probably needs to be honed a bit more. If I'm hearing you correctly, and this is how I'm interpreting it, so you can back here, grapes is I'm called to live a fruitful life as a disciple. And then the seeds are that I'm supposed to multiply my life into others. I think if I'm hearing correctly, that's kind of the context of it. What you're doing then by putting that on here and somewhat itemizing that, what I'm seeing is that this first part is I need to grow and be productive as a disciple, but ultimately what I'm called to do is to reproduce and to multiply. And I think in that sense, I think there's a ton of value in there because you're showing fruit in two different angles.
The only thing I'd add to Claren, again, since I missed Michael's demonstration, this is probably much better, so I'm glad to have a good model to appreciate that. And but when you wrote the word tension, again, from a first time, I wanted a bit more of that fleshed out. At least I was thinking about that and actually maybe living it. So just sort of wanting to maybe pause a little longer there. And then I thought you were going to write the word tendency. So to me, it's two similar things because I find that the tendencies we lean towards mostly bearing fruit. That's why we're having this discussion. So when I see the word tension, I also see almost writing the word tendency as a way of having self-reflection, kind of the window piece, mirror piece.
Yep. That's good. Really good. And then your final question. So what's God saying to you from John 15 and the context? If you were to itemize things like I'm highlighting here, that question of tendency, then you could open up the doors with, you're basically opening up very specific doors for people to respond within. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I was just feeling I wasn't sure how long I talked. I was trying to keep it shorter. So yeah.
No, it was longer. I mean, I think because of your intro and then your personalization, it was definitely longer. So I felt like we were getting the full version of the semicircle, which isn't, bad. In general here, we're looking for a quicker 4 to 5 minutes, depending upon how difficult or complex the different shape is. So I think that it was a longer version, but I liked hearing it because I'm trying to learn from you guys about how you're articulating this stuff in the way of Jesus Huddles you guys are leading. So I'm always like willing to go on the longer ride to see the different nuances that you guys are bringing to the table so I can speak into that and give you some outside input.
So can I just go back to tension tendency? As John commented, so Claren, you just crossed out tension there. Is that something that you're hearing from John? Tendency would be a better word, more descriptive of what you're doing. I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I kind of like what he was saying there, because I probably even relate to tendency more than tension. Like the tendency is that, well, for tendency for me is I spend more time in bearing fruit. Like, if I'm going to miss something, there's times I'm having time with God and I'm journaling and talking to him. And then I'm telling him, I got to get to work. Like, and it's, and he seems to be okay with that. Okay, let's go to work, but, so that's my tendency, right? Is that a tension? I think it's maybe, I didn't mind John's word of, actually it's a tendency maybe. I don't know. Either works, I think.
I think in general, here's something I guess I'm operating with an unconscious competence in too. I tend to try to only put the words in my initial presentation of it, only put the words I expect a response from. So here's language I want them to use even in their response. So I think I'm realizing that's why I'm zeroing in on what words are here and what do I want to have done with it that I wasn't able to initially articulate. So I'm recollecting, I verbally communicated tension, but I don't know that I wrote that. Maybe I did. I think I try to emphasize that there is a tension that we feel between the two of them. And then I, tie that usually back to our culture. We live in a culture that values productivity. We're patted on the back for it. If we say that we're busy, we take that as a trophy, as an accolade. We don't want to be lazy. And sometimes we can look at this. So I think that verbalizing tension is great. I probably wouldn't write it like you've crossed it out there, but I do like the value of including tendency in there as something for people to return to. We usually have a tendency to bear fruit or to abide. Now, most of them are going to say they're so busy bearing fruit that they're not abiding. That's just the natural spot that most people who are going to be huddling are going to have. But at least you've seeded that with a word that gives them, hey, my tendency is to bear fruit. So it's like I'm realizing by what you write on there, you're prepping the kinds of responses that you're going to get, or opening the door for responses.
So again, being new to it today, I'm curious if the other guys are thinking that I'm learning to be like Jesus in my attitudes, behaviors. And so this is a conversation around the behaviors and rhythms of Jesus. This is where it would fit into our language a bit. Or am I missing something?
No, we had that conversation, and, my thought would be it would land in behaviors, but it was like, it was a bit of, where does this go? Because it's not clear cut, but behaviors was one of the landing places, like you said. It's almost intuitive that it would land in Jesus' behaviors, but I think Brian had it in another place as well.
Yeah, because we were on talking about family on mission a little bit, and there was a connection for me in how we're modeling this family on mission. Is it fruit bearing, abiding? Well, it's both, and so there's a fit there as well. And you could go down our statements, and probably this is it's somewhat of an add-on for me, but I think it can go in behavior. But I like the connection to family on mission because of that context of what we're trying to model together.
And I heard that in Claren's lead-in. If we're going to be productive people who are going to be multiplying this out, you're not just receiving from me, you're a producer, not just a consumer. You're going to have to figure out how to live a life that can sustain that. Let's look to Jesus as an example and model. So I think both, Brian, for what you're bringing up, for being people who live as family on mission, and Claren, like your lead-in, people who are productive, not just consumers, we've got to be able to do this. So I think that's kind of where it fits in there. Is there a separation between attitudes and behaviors? Do you guys actually separate that? Or when you guys list behaviors, you mean both attitudes and behaviors, not just one or the other?
Yeah, attitudes, behavior, and character.
Yeah, they're separated out.
Okay. Because I think that I would, if they were separated, I would teach this first as a behavior because I want the activity to happen. I would then go deeper and go, but if you don't realize this, that our attitudes precede our behaviors. So let's go a little bit underneath this now at an identity level. Why do you work your tail off? And what do you think you're proving to yourself and to the rest of the people around you? Now we've gone deeper to the attitude. I think if you went there first, you wouldn't have the trust credibility with people. So I think it'd be easier to approach it with behaviors first and then go under the current to the attitude. Because that's what I find in my life. It's just I still am stuck on this treadmill of trying to prove my worth and value by what I produce. Anything else, guys? I think this is really good conversation. One, for what you guys are rolling out, and then for us to dialogue on. And I can totally see we'll skip the questions for today and just look at the text. I feel the need to respond to these text messages now that they're showing up on my screen too.
Sorry.
No, that's great. All right, you can pull that down, Claren. Thanks a bunch.
Take it down?
Yeah, take it down. Okay, let's turn to the scriptures. We're going to look at, is it Matthew 3?
Mark
3. Look at Mark 3:31 to the end. And I think oftentimes, to the end. So 31 to the end. And then I think this will give us a little contextualization with the family on mission bend in it as well. All right, I'm in New Living Translation, as I usually am. So, context for this: Jesus has, launched his ministry. He's called his disciples. He's been really kind of rejected back in his own hometown already, and now he's doing ministry out with a new oikos. So he's, launched a new family on mission through Simon and Andrew's house. And he's told them, hey, I'm going to teach you to fish for men. And so he's been doing that. He's turned their oikos inside out. Now demoniacs are coming in, and they look very different than they had before. And so it's in the midst of this context and flow of a change that we get this here. So then Jesus' mother and brothers came to see him. They stood outside and sent word for him to come out and talk with them. There was a crowd sitting around Jesus, and someone said, your mother and your brothers are outside asking for you. Jesus replied, who is my mother? Who are my brothers? Then he looked at those around him and said, look, these are my mother and brothers. Anyone who does God's will is my mother and sister, or my brother and sister and mother. So we put it in this semicircle teaching and training because in some ways you see some pruning taking place. under the banner of the mission of God. So Jesus, has really already, his family has rejected him. And so he left them behind, really kind of, in a sense, shaking the dust off of his feet and moving toward a new work amongst Simon and Andrew's house. And now, just like other outsiders were waiting outside to be able to come in potentially into this family, you see Jesus' mother and brothers now outside wanting to be able to come in. They're there because in other contexts, we can see that they think he's kind of going crazy and they're wanting to stop him. And so there is this division between him moving forward to hear the call of the Father and walking in obedience, and then now, in a sense, almost a distraction pulling him in another direction. What he says is, I will continue to move forward and bear fruit. Again, that's coming out of what he's hearing from the Father. So it's, fruit coming out of abiding. And you can see it in his question. Those who do God's will are my family. That's who's in my family, because I'm about these things. And in some ways, what he's stating is that those who are, this is not an indirect statement, those who are not about God's will are not in my family. And so he really is talking about areas, even relationally, that may be pruned from our lives in order to, out of abiding and hearing the voice of the Lord, move forward to be able to bear fruit in light of the kingdom and the call that God has on us. And sometimes we need to prune away even relationships that could be some forms of distraction in there, pulling us in a different direction. So Jesus is operating out of that voice of the Lord, from an abiding voice to the call of God on his life to be about the mission of God. And he's even letting relationships fall where they will. Are you in line with God's will? You're a part of my family. Are you not in line with God's will? You're not a part of my family. Now, he's not outright rejecting them. He's not condemning them. We see full circle, a return. Mary is there at the cross at the very end of Jesus' life. And even to the point where he makes provision for her through John the Apostle. But at this point, we see him kind of with the shake the dust off of your feet. I am going to be focused on the call of the Father right now, even though this is something maybe at a heart level. I think we can assume he's human. He was human just like us, though I might have a heart to be able to be compassionate and to wait on you. So just some thought here. Love to get some feedback from you guys on this. Some crickets. Go for it, Brian.
Yeah, I struggle with this passage at times, although I see the central focus of it is, here's what it means to be part of Jesus' family. But I still think of his mother and brothers are outside. I still go there, and maybe it's a little part of my own context as there's a couple kids that aren't maybe following the way I would see, and so I'm struggling in a sense with this call. I appreciate the spiritual family that God's leading me to, and oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I'm starting another huddle tomorrow as well. So that's great, spiritual family, but I still, it's so abrupt. The authors in each of these, they just go on to another thing after this. It's not so what happened with his family? And so I'm struggling there, because I still feel the call of God on me to invest in family that may not be totally on mission at this time. Yeah, so that's what I'm struggling with.
I don't think that your application there, personally, I still feel called to invest in my family, who is, in a sense, like I think you're saying, outside of the house right now. I don't think that's a bad application. This is where I would challenge it. If you were not continuing to move forward and you were waiting for them before you joined.
Right. Okay.
And I know some families, at the local level, who that is the kind of stance. We're such a strong family unit. The family has become an idol of itself, and it's actually interfering with the obedience to the call of God on their lives. So I think that, again, there's this shaking off of the dust of the feet. That doesn't mean I'm condemning you, because that's the Luke 10 context. Like, you will be judged, and it's not that kind of shaking off of the dust, but recognizing you're not there at this point, and there may be this time where the full circle comes back around. I'm going to make an investment, but I'm not going to let this be the one thing I'm waiting on God to do. Then I'll follow in the rest of the areas.
Good.
I agree. It is interesting that there's it leaves the emotions out of it in this text.
No, I appreciate that word. That's helpful to me. Yeah, that's good.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I'll just jump in to say that I want to be careful not to read it in the fact that he might have let them in eventually. It was just a teachable moment. So we don't get that script or part. We're actually jumping to a conclusion that he just shut the door in their faces. Doesn't say that at all. It's just in this moment he was teaching something about prioritizing the kingdom. And from an adoption perspective, showing that he's adopting a lot others into his family. So I get the abruptness, but I think we're assuming he just slammed the door and ignored them. He doesn't say he did or didn't do that. He just uses a teachable moment to talk to people about oikos, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, I would kind of land there too, John. I later, well, then you get the book of James and the book of Jude, and then you have his family coming around, his mother, and so it's I don't know. I'd use shake the dust off my feet. More of Jesus prioritized the mission, even though his family at that time didn't come along, but they did later. Some of them did come along. So maybe
no, I like that.
Might be how I would present that as my priority here. This is what I'm doing. If you want to join me, fine. But if not, I'm headed in this direction.
Yeah.
So and then later they did join him. So I'm sure he was pleased as punch when.
Yep, absolutely.
They came around. So just a thought there.
Yep. No, I like that. Any other thoughts on the text?
Yeah, your use of the word pruning in here I struggle with it a bit, but I get it, because prioritizing is a type of pruning.
It is.
Pruning just feels lopping them off, like Claren's earlier discussion. I go, well, they're on the ground and they're just going to leave and trample on them, versus prioritizing is a type of pruning.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I don't love you less.
Yep.
It's just about my day and my journey with Jesus is what's guiding me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's kind of wrap up here. I'm not going to try. Well, no, I guess we've got the time. Let's not go to the question, so ignore the chat bar. But let's just kind of pause and take our hearts before the Lord and just mine out, what does it seem like the Lord's saying to us? And then we'll try to verbalize that with one another as our conclusion for the call. So, Father, thank you for the chance to be together, to see the semicircle, to catch up with one another, to look at this text together, and ultimately to come to this point. So, Lord, show us the things that you're saying to us right now so we can get some clarity on that. Give about a minute's time, and then I'll check back in. All right, for me, I've got a couple of things. I think I've got Lynn's description of the circle, entering in and exiting in a different direction. I found that to be simple, profound, and helpful, because every time I come back to the semicircle to teach it, I find that I'm like, I got to examine another portion of my life. So it feels like the one that you keep going deeper and deeper in. In particular, then, that leads me to, I'm just recognizing that right now my morning routine is not what I would like it to be. I'm not finding, like I kind of heard John testifying, producing so much life. So that's kind of sending me back. That's the change that the semicircle is bringing forth in my life this season right now. Lynn, what about you?
Well, this passage of scripture was something that just in putting it in its context and me imagining sitting beside Jesus with this storyline going on, and then a thought came to my mind, like, I have my own family. My brothers aren't necessarily following Jesus like I'm following Jesus. So what do I do with them? I love them. We have reunions. We gather together. I treat them as family. They're important. My own kids, my own family, my grandchildren, this is all covenant relationship. And it's a high priority, and I highly value it. At the same time, in practice, I move on in what Jesus is telling me to do, and I don't necessarily get caught up in what, well, and it's always there, but it's like, well, Jesus, I need to keep moving on. I don't want to get hung up on the fact that my brother might not make it to heaven, kind of thing, It weighs on me, but it doesn't freeze me as I think about how I unpack it in my own posture. But boy, if it were to come to my own kids and grandkids, that would be a different, oh, ball of wax. That one would be, I'd have to struggle with that one a bit more.
Thanks for articulating that. That's really helpful. Somebody else? What's the Lord saying to you?
Yeah, I just wrote this down. The priority is on the mission, and part of that priority is inviting people into the family. And so that, in that context, I suppose what I was sharing earlier, my family's part of that mission. And I'm, they're still my family, but I'm still wanting them to be a part of the missional family that we're on together. So, yeah, that's where I'm landing right now.
Again, I think we had said this before, like, the door's open for them to. I will continue to make an investment. I'm focused on the mission, and I'd like them to be a part of this spiritual family.
Yeah.
Nice. Claren, what about you?
Well, my mind went back to John 15. Really hit me as I was prepping and reviewing the text, just the absolute impossibility of what I do to really be, apart from me, you can do nothing. Well, I mean, I do all kinds of things apart from God, but anything for the kingdom that's lasting and really bearing the fruit comes out of this consistent, deep, intimate relationship of abiding with Him, where I'm in tune with Him, denying myself, following His lead. And so that just hit me anew and fresh again. I know all that, but it just hit me again. And I have a fairly good rhythm, daily devotionally with God. And sorry, guys. And yet I know that I probably benefit from regularly journaling, and I've been knowing I should do that, do it some. I think I've talked to you guys about that before. Not real successful in that. That when I do journal seems to have me I think it helps me remember what God has said to me. That's the biggest thing about journaling. And makes it more concrete. And so that's the piece I'm missing, because I have a good time with him. And then, I don't know, half an hour later, if you'd ask me what it was all about, I might not even remember, sort of thing. So that's an area of ongoing growth, I think, for me.
That's good. John, what about you?
I would just say that I just pausing, bowing my head, felt very affirmed in the season that the Lord has me in this semicircle thing. So just feel really affirmed that I do have tendencies to dive into the work and to dive into the fruit bearing, but the habits that I'm deliberate and have anchored now, that have become habits in my morning, are really, I don't know, pulling it back to a better feel for my day. So I just was been greatly affirmed by seeing it, hearing Claren, and saying, he's got me here. I need to, it was just affirming that to stay at it, kind of a continue in feel to it.
Yep, that's really good. Yep, and I think, like you guys have seen me do before with a positive kairos, you're oftentimes reverse engineering. What was it that made the things successful? Maybe even something that might be helpful if time permitted, John. What was it that you really had to surrender in order to be able to get that? What did it cost you? Because usually, I think that's what's in my mind right now. While Claren was sharing, well, everybody's been sharing, but I've been thinking like, okay, what is this going to cost me if I wake up tomorrow morning and kind of change these rhythms? So those types of things are oftentimes good to articulate, because you might have made the decision and didn't consciously comprehend that's really what the cost was. And so I think, again, in a group setting like this, it's good for other people to be able to hear that, because we're working, discipling into one another's lives that way. So, all right, guys, next week we have a strategic huddle. So those of you that went to Phoenix, what I'd love to do is get the chance to be able to hear from you guys. What were the strategic priorities you walked away with? So that I think kind of help our conversation and piece together these two different things. So let's see, Claren and John and I will then primarily listen to you two, because Nathaniel didn't go to Phoenix, right? Yeah. So we'll listen to you guys share about those priorities, and that'll give us a chance to be able to dialogue, ask questions, make sure that we're on the same page, and kind of test that a little bit further. I'll try to articulate that in the homework assignment for next week as we go forward.
Just a note there, Brian and I are going to be at Karis Camp, just finishing up another retreat. And so we finish up just as we're going to be and that's about a 1:30 start time in Pacific time. So I'm planning on being in the room, but the internet isn't always the best at camp. So just to say that's the context. And so we'll give her a shot with the best internet we have.
Would it be better than to postpone that a week and just flip-flop? We'll make the strategic happen 2 weeks from now, and we'll jump into the content huddle for the last chapter. Would that be better?
No, I'm going to miss October. See, Brian and I are unpacking the way of Jesus to some denominational leaders that day, and we'll have.
No, that'll be fine.
Yeah, sure.
Like even if you want to stop in Didsbury on the way home, of that. So I think just for the sake of the probability is the internet will stick.
Yeah.
If we put that off a week, probably would be better. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. So what I'll do is I'll lay out, like, we're going to go into new content for the final chapter of the book, and then we'll postpone our strategic huddle to the following week so that we know we've got good connectivity, and then Brian and Lynn can lead us out in the strategic priorities from the Phoenix learning community. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good, guys. We'll see you next week.
You bet. Bye.
Blessings.